Why did El Greco purposely misrepresent Toledo, Spain, the city he knew so well? The cathedral has been moved. The royal palace sits in the wrong position. An entire monastery appears to float on a cloud. Toledo was El Greco's hometown, where he lived for the final 37 years of his life. So why did he rearrange the city? Was it a stylistic choice? Or was something else going on? Something deeper that the painter never explained? In this video, we'll take a closer look at this enthralling work of art so we can figure out why El Greco painted Toledo so dramatically. First, you need to understand what kind of painting this is, or rather, what kind of painting it isn't. In the late 1590s, when El Greco painted this, landscape paintings barely existed in Spain. The Council of Trent, which ended in 1563, had essentially banned landscapes as unsuitable subjects for art. Religious paintings, yes. Portraits of nobles and clergymen, certainly. But a painting of a city under a stormy sky? That was almost unheard of. Some art historians believe View of Toledo may be the first Spanish landscape ever painted. More impressively, cityscapes, paintings focused entirely on depicting a city, didn't really exist anywhere in 16th century Europe. El Greco may have literally invented the genre, which, in a sense, perfectly suits the man's career. This was so unusual that some scholars have even suggested the painting must have been cut from a larger work. Perhaps it was once the background of a religious scene that was later removed, they figured. But there's no evidence for that. The painting stands alone. El Greco simply wanted to paint Toledo and nothing else. The questions are why? And why did he paint it like this? Look at the sky. It's not a pleasant afternoon. There are stormy clouds above the city, incredible hues of blue and black. Light breaks through in places, illuminating patches of green hillside and some landmarks in the city. The hills seem to pulse and the buildings appear to twist. This was El Greco at his finest. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke, after seeing this painting in 1908, wrote that splintered light tills the ground, turning it over, tearing into it. And that summarizes the first conclusion we can make about this painting, which deepens the mystery just a little further. This is not a documentary image. This is not what Toledo looked like on any particular day. Instead, it was what Toledo felt like for the painter as the final years of his life approached. Now let's talk about El Greco himself. To understand this painting, you simply need to understand the painter. El Greco was not Spanish. His real name was Dominikos Theotokopoulos, and he was born on the island of Crete in 1541. It was a Venetian possession at the time, known as the Kingdom of Candia. He trained as an icon painter in the Byzantine tradition. You know, those flat stylized images of saints with golden backgrounds. When he reached the peak of his ability in his home country, he went to Venice, absorbing the influence of the master colorists there. After Venice, he relocated to Rome, and by his mid-30s, he was a sophisticated artist who had mastered the techniques of the Italian Renaissance. But he had a profound dream. He wanted to become a court painter. In the 1570s, King Philip II of Spain was building the Escorial, a massive palace just outside Madrid, and he needed artists to fill it with paintings. El Greco saw his opportunity. In 1577, he traveled to Spain, first to Madrid, then to Toledo. He was hoping for royal patronage, and he desperately wanted Philip II to recognize his talent and make him a court painter. It didn't happen. El Greco painted a work for the Escorial titled The Martyrdom of Saint Maurice, but Philip II rejected it. The King of Spain found El Greco's style too strange, too expressive, too far from the seriousness that he preferred. At least, that's what we assume. The exact reasons for Philip's dissatisfaction remain unclear. Some say he didn't like living people appearing in religious scenes. Others say El Greco's style violated the Counter-Reformation principle that content should matter more than style. Whatever the reason, El Greco's dream of royal patronage were finished. He would never be a court painter. And so, he stayed in Toledo, and here's where it gets interesting. In 1561, 16 years before El Greco arrived, Philip II had moved the royal court from Toledo to Madrid. Toledo had been the capital of Spain, the seat of power, the center of everything. And then, suddenly, it wasn't. When Philip moved to Madrid, Toledo began a slow decline. The population dropped and the economy weakened. The place that had been the heart of Spain became stagnant. But something remained: the church. Toledo was still the religious capital of Spain, home to the most powerful archbishops in the country. And it was the church, not the king, that became El Greco's patron for the rest of his life. For nearly 40 years, El Greco painted for Toledo's churches and monasteries. Toledo became his home in a way that no other place had ever been. So with this knowledge, when he painted View of Toledo, what was he really painting? Some art historians believe the answer is straightforward. El Greco was painting his feelings. Rather than documenting what Toledo looked like, he was expressing what it felt like to live there. The dramatic sky, the twisting landscape, the sense of divine presence, all of it reflects an interior state, a spiritual experience. The city becomes a vehicle for expressing man's relationship with the divine. Toledo sits at the top of a hill, close to heaven, yet still earthly. It's at the highest point he could possibly paint it without being unrealistic. The storm above suggests divine judgment or divine power, or possibly even both. This interpretation makes sense. El Greco was a deeply religious painter, and Toledo was a profoundly religious city. The mysticism that was felt in Counter-Reformation Spain is evident in every brushstroke. But there's another theory, one that's harder to prove, but in my opinion, fascinating to consider. What if El Greco wasn't just painting his feelings? What if he was making an argument? Remember, Toledo had lost its status as capital of Spain less than half a century earlier. But there were people in Toledo who wanted the court to return. Powerful people. Church officials, wealthy citizens, and intellectuals who remembered the glory days. El Greco's other landscape painting of Toledo, titled View and Plan of Toledo, which he painted around 1610, might offer some clues. As you can see, that painting is very different from this one. It includes a detailed map of the city, an allegory of the Tagus River, and a vision of the Virgin Mary presenting a chasuble to Saint Ildefonsus, Toledo's patron saint. Scholars believe View and Plan of Toledo was commissioned by Pedro Salazar de Mendoza, a map collector who was deeply invested in promoting Toledo's importance. The painting can be read as propaganda. It promoted Toledo's sanctity, its history, and most importantly, its worthiness as a capital. So another question arises: could View of Toledo have served a similar purpose? Look at how El Greco positioned the city. Toledo sits at the very top of the hill, elevated above everything else. The cathedral and the Alcazar, the royal palace, are given prominence, even though their positions have been altered. Art historian Walter Littke has suggested that El Greco painted Toledo not as it was, but as he hoped it would become. In other words, he created an idealized version of the city in his mind and then painted that vision. If this is true, then the distortions aren't errors or stylistic choices, they're deliberate. El Greco was rearranging the city to make it look more impressive, more worthy of being a capital again. The stormy sky, in this interpretation, isn't just atmosphere, it's drama. It's a way of saying, this is no ordinary city. Of course, we can't know for certain what El Greco intended, as he left no written explanation. But then there's another clue that might provide us with the answer. Both of El Greco's Toledo landscapes were found in the estate of Pedro Salazar de Mendoza after his death. Salazar owned View of Toledo and View and Plan of Toledo, and he was a man who cared deeply about promoting his city. In my opinion, it's likely that both paintings were part of the same project, part of the campaign to remind the world of Toledo's greatness. And it's possible that this commission made El Greco the happiest man in the world. After all, he had been rejected by the king and embraced by the city, the one place he happily called home. Finally, there's one more layer to consider. El Greco's style was unlike anything else in 16th century Europe. Many of the figures he painted are elongated, their limbs stretched beyond natural proportions. Together with his colors, which are intense and unreal most of the time, this makes for an extraordinary combination. He was trained in the Byzantine tradition, where images weren't meant to represent physical reality, but instead evoke spiritual truth. He also absorbed the Mannerist movement in Italy, which rejected simple imitation of nature in favor of exaggeration. When El Greco painted Toledo, he brought all of this with him, so it's fair to conclude that naturalism wasn't his goal to begin with. He was painting something that couldn't be seen with the eyes. In other words, something we can only describe as the soul of a place. So why did El Greco distort his view of Toledo? Perhaps we have to look at something the painter once said himself. He said he painted because the spirits whisper madly inside my head. El Greco rearranged the city so we could see it as he saw it, a place suspended between earth and heaven. Today, View of Toledo hangs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It's far from El Greco's largest painting, but large enough to provide a glimpse into the soul of one of the most fascinating painters who ever lived.